Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co hostess, Anna, and I am here with none other than.
Hey everybody, it's Margaret. Welcome to another cast. If you grieflings and frightlings, I forgot to throw that in there. I'm just so excited because we are talking about two movies today. One that turns 45 years old and the other one that turns 20 years old. These are just great movies to me. Anna, what movies are we talking about? And do you share my enthusiasm for these movies?
Yes, I do. And part of it is because of the nostalgia. We're going to take a trip to the shopping mall today, guys. And we are going to discuss none other than the original Dawn of the Dead and the remake. So go ahead and prop open those coffin lids, grab a little bruja brew, and settle in for our cast.
Yes. Ooh, welcome. So we've got Dawn of the Dead. We'll be going back tonight and forward and all over this timeline. So for those of you that haven't watched, hit pause, go watch the movies. We've got tons of spoilers ahead. Two movies that, to me, I felt a bit sad when I watched them because they still hold very true. Watching them, I was like, it's been 45 years, it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
And the themes of consumerism, the themes of like resource guarding and have and have not still were very prevalent today.
Oh, I agree. And, while we're talking about the themes in the films, there are several triggers. So, trigger
Thank you for
warnings.
remembering.
Obviously, lots of zombies, violence, cannibalism, gore, children, even though they're zombified, child death, twisted familial roles and dichotomies and dynamics as a result of the zombies. A lot of realistic things too. If you are still navigating your journey after COVID, these films may not be for you as well. We do see a lot of things, particularly in the original representatives from scientific organizations talking about the virus and the cure and those sorts of things. So if you feel that might be triggering, I may not suggest that you would be watching these films.
Yes, agree. Yep. And they're gory, they're bloody. The first one, more cheesy. I mean, the bite, which looks like bloody foam. And
It's great.
yes, for those animal lovers out there. In the second one, there is a dog. The dog does not die. The dog is zombie immune, which made me wonder if animals are zombie immune, why don't we see more of them in
Right.
zombie movies? I was like, okay, if they're immune in this world,
It's
don't you
because
think
they're
we'd see like
smart.
more
They're getting
packs of
out of
dogs?
there, right? They're like, I'm getting out of here, weirdo humans.
Yes.
Right? I actually would venture to argue in the remake, the dog is probably one of the smartest characters that we see as well. Um, that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, I mean, it's great. I think that a lot of the themes, as you mentioned, in both that keep resurfacing. Some of them are super fun just in terms of setting and certain things that happen, but some of them are very serious and speak to a lot of different things going on in our society that continue.
Yes, I agree. And the second one probably has one of the best opening scenes for a horror movie. It is just probably the first 10 minutes, it's action packed. You're just going, you're in
Yeah.
it. And I really appreciate how Zack Snyder did it, where as the audience, we know more than Anna, the main character. So it's almost like when she's getting up in the morning, we're like, like stupid, like you should have watched the news and not been in the shower. Like you are missing like all of this, which was different from George
Right.
Romero's, where we're in the news station. So we're like on the front lines of the media people
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. And I appreciate, right, that what was her name? The main lady,
Franny.
Franny, yeah. You learn that she is in like a position of power. Seems like she's a producer or something. and yet still the sexism. There's all these
Yeah.
men. Nobody seems to really respect her. Seems to
Mhm.
be a theme throughout the movie where
Oh,
she would
yeah.
have an opinion. It was almost like, well, the men are talking, or you don't know
Mhm.
how to shoot a gun. And she's like, well, teach me. You can't fly the helicopter. Well, then
Yeah.
teach me. Like, just because I'm a woman does not mean I'm useless. And
Exactly.
she did. She cooked
Mhm.
for them. She
Yeah.
cleaned. She was the nurse. Even
Mhm.
after she said, did you catch that? She's like, I'm not going to do this
Mhm.
anymore. And then they show her bandaging
Yeah.
up one of them.
Which made me laugh because I think as, you know, cisgender females, really anyone who identifies as the nurturing caregiver energy, which typically in our society is assumed to be more of a feminine energy, that happens. Like, how often do we say after like a huge event, I'm done. I'm not going to do this next time. And then the next time rolls around and there we go planning again, it's just funny how certain mentalities apply to the nurturing character roles and how that translates throughout the ages. But some of the things too, I mean, watching the movie, it was kind of par for the course. It was to be expected. It was normal at the time the film was made, right? So that was like 1978, I think. Yeah.
1978 was the original.
Okay, yeah. I had not been hatched yet. I don't even think I was a dream in my mom's mind yet. Um, but um, I was still living on my home planet. No, but the remake was, I can't believe it's 20 years old already.
2004.
Nuts.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
wow.
holy crap. But you're right. I think it's cool too just to think about like how they both start because they were in the newsroom and then, you know, the news is on and just how things translate. And yet somehow everyone ends up at the mall. And for those of you who are listening that did not grow up going to the mall, I am so sorry. You really missed out because watching both films, particularly the original, it just was so nostalgic because I grew up in the 90s. The mall was the place to go. Like when you were a kid, you were going to the mall with your parents and then it was like a big deal once you were old enough to like walk around the mall with your little friends and then meet your parent back at the fountain. That was like the center spot. And I feel like that doesn't happen anymore. So I'm super sad that the kiddos miss out on that now.
Yes, that was like a huge rite of
Hmm.
passage. Like, whose parents are going to take you to the mall, whose parents
Yeah.
are going to pick you up, and then you're just going to spend your day at the mall. And that was
Hmm.
huge. And I always thought that was like in a zombie apocalypse, that's a really smart place
Hmm.
to go. You've got
Yeah.
food, you've got
Hmm.
water, you got clothing,
Oh,
you have
yeah.
everything you need for a while.
Yeah, like all the resources, as long as you can keep the zombies out, which, in both films, they're successfully able to do for a period of time, which I
Mhm.
think would be pretty applicable to reality. You can only keep them at bay for a period of time. Um, I also thought that the original Dawn of the Dead, they're just eating flesh. There's no brains type scenario. And as we see the Dead movies kind of evolve, they want brains only. So I was like,
That's interesting. I didn't catch that. Yeah.
yeah, because they're just biting you wherever. They're not going for the cranium at all. They're not going for the brains. Yet we still learn that to effectively defeat a zombie, you have to sever the head.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Don't shoot them anywhere else. And I
Hmm.
appreciate the original. We've got Tom Savini's original
Hmm.
makeup, which
Yeah,
is just fun and
it's freshly
cheap.
risen blue. That's what I
Yes.
call it. I love it. Yeah.
And then, yes. And then we move into more reality
Hmm.
based makeup. I did notice between the two films, the original, there's this little isolated group, and they do have some interpersonal conflict.
Hmm.
The remake, though, we have a bigger group of
Yeah.
people, and it starts off with interpersonal conflict. We
Mm-hmm.
have the mall security guards who
Yeah.
are resource guarding that they don't want anybody in. We've
Mm-hmm.
got Ving Rhymes as the cop who I love with Anna,
Mm-hmm.
and they're kind of like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Nope. We're staying. And
Mm-hmm.
then the bus of people, they weren't a bus, they're like a
Just
truck of
like,
like
yeah, the truck that
maybe,
comes.
oh yeah, we have Mackay Pfeiffer and
Yeah, and
his
his wife.
girlfriend that
Yeah.
start with Ving Rhymes, and interesting all that interpersonal conflict. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it really touches on in Crisis how
Yeah.
people start to divide, like, no, 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 like if
Mm-hmm.
my life's threatened, you need to go.
Yeah. And it's really, it speaks a lot to that, especially like, how do we come together when our natural inclination is to break apart? Um,
Yes.
yeah. And I feel like every group kind of has that one character who's like, okay, we need to get it together. Let's snap into reality now and and figure out like if we don't help each other sustain, we're not going to make it. Um, but I think some of the movie is very bittersweet too, like especially the original. And it's funny because you see these weird like trauma respect type bonds, like when they're in the chopper and they come across the other guys that are on the run that are trying to take the boat, and they're basically like, they're on the run too, they're not really going to mess with us, so they were just like, okay, and everybody goes and does their own thing, and it's like, okay, like
Mhm.
that's cool, because initially you're like, there's going to be some sort of violence or something really bad, but it doesn't happen.
Yes. Ooh, I love that point, right? That and the dichotomy, like in the beginning, it's like, yeah, you take the boat, we're taking the
Mm-hmm.
chopper, respect. To
Yeah.
then later in the film where we have the motorcycle gang that
Yeah.
seems to be surviving just by wiping out other people's
Mm-hmm.
resources, and how scary
Yeah.
that can be, that now in an apocalypse you have to fear the living and you have to fear the
Mm-hmm.
dead, and how brutal they
Yes.
can be,
Like they
just like,
enjoy it. Yeah. They're
mhm,
doing it for
yeah,
kicks. Like they're not just like, as you said, blowing the zombies away. They're hurting other people and taking from them just for the sport of it.
yes,
And it's
yeah.
quite disturbing. And I did have to laugh though, because the way that the biker gang looked, you knew that they were quote unquote bad people, because like Tom Savini's character, he had shaggy unkempt hair and a gold earring, and it was kind of funny to me too, like, okay. But at the time, that was kind of what a baddie looked like. So um it was amusing to me.
Yes.
Yeah, and even
It
like,
was. Yeah.
yeah. But the beginning, like after the newsroom, you go to this like rescue mission, and something that really struck me, which I don't know if you picked up on this, the cops or the rescue dudes, whatever you're gonna call the group, when they were going into the P's to get the living people out, the verbiage that they will use, which I will not repeat, um, and the things that they were saying, I was like, there are still people today that use that disgusting language and think that same way. The first thought I had when one of the characters made a remark about um, persons of Puerto Rican descent living in the P's, yet we're going to put them up in these fancy, expensive hotels. I was like, how many times do you hear people on the news talking about like the homeless or immigrants or, some other group, and government funds going to sustain them and help them? I was like, whoa, um, this was 45 years ago. And it was just like kind of shocking to me, like, holy crap, there are still people out there that think along these same lines. And, it was just kind of alarming to me. I did really enjoy, though, um, the kind of notation of specific cultural and ethnic groups and their respect towards the dead, how the priest was still giving last rites even though they were zombies, and they were keeping them in the basement because of the respect for the dead. Um, I really enjoyed that. I was like, yes, yes.
I agree. That movie still really touched on race relations that sadly are still happening today, and how these white cops are going in, guns blasting, no respect for the people that they're there
Mm-hmm.
to save. The people that are there are like, oh my God, it's the cops. We have to protect ourselves. So then there's
Mm-hmm.
just all this chaos
Yeah.
amongst, and you could see like it was lower socioeconomics being invaded by the police, not understanding what's happening, the police just
Mm-hmm.
storming. Then we have Ken Foray's character, Peter,
Mm-hmm.
who is really trying to be a moral person. He's
Yeah.
trying to protect the people in the housing unit. He is,
Mm-hmm.
again, I love George Romero for having during the time, a black
Protagonist.
lead. Yes, and he's here and he's trying to like stop like the white cops from just being
Mm-hmm.
assholes. And when that one asshole white cop like got killed, I was so happy. I was
Yeah,
like,
I was
good,
just
I'm so
like, oh well.
glad you're
I'm
a
glad.
jerk.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
see the trauma bonding between
Mm-hmm.
Peter, Ken Foray's character, and Roger,
Yeah. Which
his
is
buddies
um
that are really trying to
yeah.
do the right thing. How are they
Mm-hmm.
protecting the people of this housing unit from
Mm-hmm.
the zombies? Well, the zombies are already like, people are just dying
Yeah.
left and right and becoming zombies. It's
Yeah.
an
And
unescapable situation.
it is. And I think when Roger is there and someone goes into the apartment that they're like, don't go in there, and zombies, and then the young kid who was probably a rookie or a recruit shoots himself, and Roger, like his facial expression, like he's just like, oh God. And then, like you said, then he runs into Peter and they kind of bond and they're like, we got to get out of here. Um,
All that traumatic grief that just
mhm,
really binds Peter and Roger, and then seeing their relationship and the
mhm,
heartbreak. Like you see
yeah,
Peter's struggle when Roger gets bit and they're
mhm,
really trying to keep Roger alive. And at that moment, right, Roger
yeah,
dies and he
I,
sits up.
yeah,
And for a moment, I was like, does Roger for one moment remember Peter
right,
before the zombie brain's like, I need to
mhm,
eat you? Because there
yeah,
was just like an expression on his face where it felt like him and
yeah,
Peter had a moment, almost like Peter was like, I don't want to kill you, but as soon as you come at me, I'm
yeah, I
going to
have
have
to.
to.
And I actually love that Peter takes care of zombie Roger because I think it's very bittersweet. And honestly, if there were a zombie apocalypse and I got bit, I would want someone to love me and care about me enough to make sure that my spinal column was detached from my brainstem and I didn't become a zombie. You know what I mean? And I would do that for someone I loved and cared about too. Because it's the humane thing to do in the zombie apocalypse, you know what I mean?
Yes, and those hard decisions
Mhm.
that people have to make, like, I love you,
Yeah.
I don't want to kill you. We see that how then in the remake, there's the dad and his daughter,
Mhm.
and the daughter doesn't want her dad to
Yeah.
die. And they're like, no, like, he's a zombie. This has to
Mhm.
happen.
We
Or
have to do it.
even
Yeah.
Mckay Pfeiffer with his pregnant girlfriend and
Mhm.
how he chains her up to keep
Yeah.
her alive, and how in life we hold on to life. Like, I feel like both these movies
Mhm.
demonstrate how we cling to life. We
Yeah.
don't want to let go of life. Both movies address,
Mhm.
well, since they're still living, we'll just keep them alive because they're
Yeah.
alive, right? Like, I feel like
Right.
you're talking about the scientists talking. There's this like, well,
Mhm.
they're alive, so
They're sort of, yeah, they're like animated, and um it reminds me a lot of like when you have a pet and you know that they're suffering and they just keep going because they love you,
yeah.
or the whole, like, if you are power of attorney for someone and there's like a DNR, or there's a, some sort of incident, or the doctors say, okay, well, we can resuscitate, but the chances of them having a fulfilling, quote unquote, normal life are slim to none. Like, what do you do that's most humane? How do you put your own human desires and needs and wants and emotions aside and make the best decision for that other being? And hey, if you're out there and you're listening, like, this is very serious stuff. There are so many support groups and services available to you, even if you've never thought about it. If you're thinking about naming someone as your power of attorney, if you're thinking about doing your end of life paperwork, it's never too soon to do that. So I don't really care if you're 20, 30, 40, 80, 100 years old. These are your wishes. It's your prerogative. Putting things out there in writing, having a representative that will abide by those are so important, because those are your wishes for how to sustain your life, or how to kind of discontinue services at some point that you've established. So, yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, heck yeah, we're talking about zombies, but, think about yourself, think about your future, think about what you may or may not want for your health and what that looks like, and who you may entrust with that paperwork, with that data, with that information, whether it's a family member, a friend, a lover, an attorney, a colleague, whoever this is, and make sure that that works for them too. I've known people, and Margaret, I don't know about you, you'll have to tell me. I've known people who have named others as their POA, and the other person's been like, no, I do not want that responsibility.
Yes. I love that you brought up this topic. And even though right now we're not in a zombie apocalypse, even
Mhm.
if we were, having these conversations then
Mhm.
makes these hard decisions. So
Yeah.
if I'm a zombie and I've already talked to Anna, she'll be like, I know Margaret, shoot her in the head, or I got bit, let's go ahead.
Yeah.
And these are hard conversations, like Anna is
Mhm.
saying. We need to have these because this honors you. So
Yes.
if I don't want to be on life support and I don't communicate that to my family,
Mhm.
then they might keep me on life support for 20 years, and then
Right.
they're going through all of this pain.
Mhm.
And Anna and I in our thanatology program had, like, part of the program was witnessing when the law
Mhm.
went for or against people. I remember the story of the young lady who, she could still smile, she could
Mhm.
recognize people, but because she did not have a power of attorney, a medical representative, she didn't do her last wishes. Her husband went ahead and said, she's really dead.
Mhm.
The court said yes, and they stopped all intravenous treatment, and she
Yeah.
basically starved to death.
Yeah. And
Then there was the vegetable girl
mhm.
who was legally dead. If you took her
Mhm.
off life support, she'd be legally dead. But because she didn't give any of her wishes, she was just a vegetable on life
Yeah.
support for years. So these are
Mhm.
hard conversations. You will feel better
Yes.
when you have them and you tell your family, I have a DNR. This is where
Mhm.
my mom, I think she had like 5 signed DNRs in her house. And so
Mhm.
come over, she's like, where's my DNR? Remember, I have a DNR.
Yeah.
Because she did not want to be resuscitated. She was
Mhm.
very vocal about that. So please take
Mhm.
care of this. You save yourself and your family a lot of hard conversations when you're not
Absolutely.
in a place to have them.
Yeah, and our two young cases that we spoke about, and please don't think that when Margaret and I speak about these cases that we worked on and we nickname someone like Smiling Girl or Vegetable Girl, this is for anonymity of those involved with the cases. This is not for us to be funny or give you any sort of humor. This is just how we both recognize the case and discuss it. Um,
And
but
it was
there,
heartbreaking. Both
yeah,
these cases were just
it was gut
devastating
wrenching. And I
to
think
read.
that Smiling Girl, her parents attempted to contest the spouse's
Mm-hmm.
wishes, and it turned into this crazy legal battle as well. But if we look at both of these people, right, they both were young, healthy, they had incidents occur that impacted them and put them in different vegetative states or comatose states. And these are important things to remember as well. Educate yourself, because when we think of someone being comatose, we have one vision. That's what we see on TV. There are multiple different states that you can end up in. So that's to be considered as well. It's not just like, okay, I was in a bad accident, I'm in a coma, do this. There are so many other things to consider.
There's multiple ways you can be declared
mhm.
dead. You can be brain dead and your body still functions. You can be, do you remember the term for like when you still have brain activity, but your body can't, like your heart's not
Like
going to beat on its
your
own, or you
receptors
can't breathe?
aren't fire.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
there's another term
Mhm.
for, but
Yeah, I
there's
think
two
there are like
different ways you can be.
seven
Yeah,
levels total of vegetative
yeah.
state. And yeah, so it's, our bodies are amazing machines, but like any sort of machine, not all the parts always work together and communicate and connect.
Mhm.
So those are definitely important things to remember. And I've got to say, if you want someone to take you off of life support, please know it is not like you see on the movies. I'm not going to go into strong detail. However, there are certain physical and physiological responses that happen when someone is taken off of life support. It may not be peaceful at all. So that is something that you need to understand and be prepared for as an individual, and your loved ones that you name as your decision makers also need to be aware of.
Yes. This is not pretty. So we can give that to the zombie films because they
Mhm.
do show that it's usually not pretty. I think
Yeah.
it was the remake where the lady was died and she starts to go into like the death
Mhm.
rattle,
Yeah.
and I forget, the character was like, oh, they're freaking out because they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. And that
Mhm.
is normal when people die. That's what it's called. It's the death
It's the
rattle.
death
It's our,
rattle. Yeah. And it's totally normal. And I think a lot of the time, like what we read in books and we see on TV and things like that, we just think like, oh, they like go, "Eh," and that's it. But that's not really what happens. And I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm just saying that, sometimes we get an impression of it's not very accurate. Yeah, and that's okay. Death is scary. Um, Life is scary, but you don't know what to expect. Every death is different. Um, it when you look at the statistics of how many people have seen a dead body versus how many people have been with someone when they die, the numbers are vastly different. I fall into both categories, and each each time has been extremely different, and that's okay. Yeah. So I mean, it's just, I think sometimes we associate, if we go to a viewing and we look at like a corpse, like, oh well, that's probably just what they look like when they die. It's not.
no.
So it's quite a bit different.
Yes.
Yeah. Um so back to our already undead friends. I think that the core memory in the original Dawn of the Dead, I enjoyed that. And just because like they were going to the mall, it made me think of They Live also.
Hmm.
Like you mentioned, the commercialization, the materialism, capitalism, and what a huge comment that film was on our society.
Still, that the zombies, even in both movies, there's different characters will be like, I think it's just memory. Like this is
Yeah.
just something they did, so they come back here. That it's in us.
Hmm.
This commercialism,
Yeah.
this consumerism. Well, I got to go to the mall to get
Hmm.
something. So even when we're dead, how we can just
Yeah.
fall into those habits and end up roaming the mall.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's very well done. I think both films are great. I don't really have many complaints, which is rare. um, when it comes to horror genre. I think they're done very well. I think that particularly the first Dawn of the Dead, our protagonist, right? So our final peeps in this film, we have Peter, who we've talked about quite a bit. And then we also have Franny, who, by all accounts, in the 1970s, even the 1980s, was quite a salacious lady. She was a divorcee who was not remarried and pregnant. So at that time, that was quite something. We were still kind of adjusting in society, and there definitely was not a lot of support for single parents or more modern styles of relationships. I personally like to imagine in my brain, even though I know logically this is not it, but that Franny and Peter fall in love with each other, and they land on a remote island, and they raise their family amongst like the indigenous persons and just enjoy a whole other culture and a new life. That's what happens in Anna Land at the end of Dawn of the Dead.
Well,
What
I
do you
think you
think?
touch on
Yeah.
that, right? They're moving into almost like we're going back in time to
Mm-hmm.
where if we're surviving the zombie apocalypse and we have a child,
Mm-hmm.
the community is going to raise the child because the community has to stay alive to
Right.
live. So we are now dependent on each other, back like our ancestors were.
Mm-hmm.
We had to be a group of people. We had
Yeah.
to be a community to survive. And I think that's what you're touching on, that they have to find their community
Mm-hmm.
that's going to help raise the child and
Yeah.
farm or whatever it is. It's no longer how we are now, very isolated, that
Mm-hmm.
I live here, my neighbor lives there, we really don't
Yeah.
interact.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's people need people to be
Yes.
successful.
And how that, I feel like the second movie really goes into, again, those interpersonal dynamics where
Mm-hmm.
who's going to be the leader, who's
Yeah.
going to do what role. And that individual is Ty Burrell from Modern Family, who plays just such a jerk. Like, he
Yeah.
really like epitomizes that like
Mm-hmm.
individualism and, well, I'm a
Yeah.
rich guy and I can do whatever I want kind of
Well, and I have
thing.
seen the movie so many times, and when I was rewatching it, I was like, isn't that the guy from Modern Family? I'd never realized it before. And he plays like such an adorably lovable dullard like Homer Simpson in that show. So yeah, you're right. Seeing him as like a complete douchebag, it's fun.
With no redeeming qualities, because then we
No.
also have the head of security who starts out as this huge douche. She's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm not going to cooperate. By the end of the movie, he has like, he's
Yeah.
part of the community. He's
Mm-hmm.
fighting for the community. You're actually finding yourself like rooting for
Yeah.
him as they're trying to make their escape to the boat. You want him to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've like, okay, you've redeemed yourself.
Yeah.
And so just the difference where Ty Burrell's character, you're like, you're a
Yeah.
jerk. Oh, and this stupid girl. Okay, back to the dog. Awesome dog.
Yeah.
She just throws her life like away. The dog clearly can survive
Yeah.
zombies. And then she freaks out and has to crash a van to
Mm-hmm.
go save the dog.
Yeah. It's like
I
the
mean, I
dog
get
will
why they
come
did
back.
that, but I'm like, you're
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah. It's just like, well, the dog's gonna come back. Like, let's be
Yeah.
realistic. It will get
Zombies
hungry.
don't
It'll
eat
need to come
dogs.
back. Yeah. Um, I mean, it's like, oh, how sweet, but yeah, also like you're putting yourself and everyone else at risk.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer. Although I have to say, the end of the remake, when they get to the island and you're like, oh, they made it, and then boom, guess who else is there
Yes.
too? You know?
Yes. And that like nowhere is safe.
Mm-hmm.
Like where are you
Yeah.
gonna go now?
Mm-hmm.
What are you gonna do? Maybe you were safer at the mall. Maybe you need to find some other place to
Right.
be. And an
Yeah.
island was a good idea, but
Mm-hmm.
even though when they're like, let's go to this island, I'm like, Do we
Yeah.
know? Do people live on that island? Like, are we
Yeah.
sure that like it
Yeah.
hasn't?
Like, been.
That denial, right? Like
Yeah.
both movies show somebody's bit, they're like, I'm fine, I'm
Mhm.
okay. We do that.
Mhm.
Still, oh, I
Yeah.
have a little stomach ache. I'm okay.
And then
I'm
5 minutes
fine.
later, it's like stomach flu everywhere. Yeah. And it's
Hmm.
people do that. Yeah. I think that it's I think a lot of it too is the expectation. Like, because you look at the characters who got bit. And okay, so we have Roger, who is an authoritative person trying to help other people, right? And then we also have the dad in the remake who is trying to protect his daughter. So you have these kind of, once again, these caregiver personalities. And when we talk about like caregivers and that dynamic, we're not limiting to one archetype or one, like, binary or anything like that, because anyone can fall into a caregiver role. But I think it's more of like, I'll worry about myself later. I need to worry about everyone else.
Hmm. Yes. And I
Mhm.
love how you point out how it comes out in men as well, because we do have the caregiver archetype in predominantly the female archetypes as well.
Mhm.
And like Anna is saying, anybody can be a caregiver.
Yeah.
Sadly, our media tends to just fall into
Yeah.
binaries.
hmm Yeah. And it's anyone can be. It's just, I think it's more, you know, who we are as people. Some people are built to be caregivers, some are not, and that's okay. Like, if you are a caregiver, like, that's okay. Props to you. If it's something that you're not able to give of yourself or you're not comfortable with, that's okay too. In both cases, there are solutions out there. Caregiving can be very stressful, but on the other hand, not being able to provide that to someone can be extremely stressful as well, because it's not something you're able to do, but you have to make sure it's done. And that can be very, very stressful as well. So, it's none of it's easy, but there are a lot of kind of services and solutions out there as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, it's enjoyable that we see non-stereotypical caregiver types in both
And
films.
how that's like in the zombie apocalypse. So
Yeah.
now I'm going to guess maybe they're predispositioned, those that are more likely to caregive, those
Mhm.
that are more likely to protect, those
Yeah.
that are more likely to lead. We fall into these dynamics
Mhm.
given not only our personality, also the group structure that we're
Oh,
in.
yeah.
And both movies kind of play off of like nature versus
Like,
nurture. Like,
yeah.
what are people predisposed to? Like being a
Mhm.
caretaker, we could argue Anna's a nurse, so she's
Mhm.
probably very caring person, and then how that's applied. Or
Mhm.
we could say with Franny that she was pushed into that role because
Yeah.
that role was needed, and so
Mhm.
that the nature of the environment pushed her
Yeah. Like,
into that. So it's really fascinating how
mhm.
human dynamics work out when we are in crisis.
Oh, yeah, and I love how the backdrop of these movies, and as Margaret mentioned when we started talking on the cast, we will be kind of going back and forth to the Night of the Living Dead, the Day of the Dead, Return of the Dead, all of these different films, because the backdrop is that this zombie apocalypse is happening. Like, these are not a series of films to watch when you just want to think everything is going to be okay, because this is happening. Each different film has a totally different scenario, which is showing you different characters and what they're going through and what they're experiencing. And the irony that I see is that we're consistently presented with this solution in the later films of like, just nuke the big cities. Like, we hear that in almost every single film. Um,
Mhm.
so you have all of these different circumstances and different characters, but the sort of solution is something that probably is not super efficient.
Yes, and as we continue to go into the zombie world. And I think you touched beautifully on how once the living have found their places,
Mm-hmm.
how much more sensitive they are. You made me think of, I don't think you've seen it yet, Train to Busan, the
Mm-hmm.
ending of that movie where the lady and the little girl are making their way to the protected area, and the military's like, I can't tell if they're living or dead. Well, then just shoot them, is
Mm-hmm.
what the guy says, because now as the living,
Yeah.
you've already learned you can't take any risks. You can't risk
Right.
shooting somebody
Mm-hmm.
that could possibly be dead or
Yeah.
bitten. And that can mirror how we are in society already. We're
Mm-hmm.
already kind of looking at people. Are you a safe person? Are you a
Mm-hmm.
dangerous person? Zombie apocalypse just feels
Yeah.
like it makes it easier. Nope, you got bit, you got
Exactly.
scratched, you're an unsafe person. Then now we are
Mm-hmm.
stuck in this, like, are you
Yeah.
safe? Are you not safe? How can I trust you?
Mhm. It's almost, it kind of reminds me in a sense of the Scarlet Letter, right? Because if you're bit, I know you're not
Mm-hmm.
safe. Whereas, and we have a future cast coming up about this, but oftentimes when humans meet one another, we try to show the best side of ourselves. So the safe person dynamic is, well, you see the best first. You don't see maybe those down or bad days, or kind of the things that have shaped us to be who we are that maybe we're not super proud of. Um, Whereas, like, a little bite mark here is going to show that I want to eat your brains, and that's it. So
It makes it very much more black and white and not as
everything a gray area.
complicated. Like, who
Yeah.
are you? And that we are good and bad, and we're not
Hmm.
just in these
Yeah.
black and white roles and
Yeah.
places in the world.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's just the disposability of people is scary. And once again, like, I haven't seen Train to Busan yet, but I'm very excited to see it. It's on my watch list. But the idea of the safe zone, quote unquote, yet human beings have become disposable. So the point is to sustain life, yet you're treating it as something just kind of superfluous. Like, okay.
Because I think zombie movies reflect on the fragility of life,
Mm-hmm.
the beauty, the wonder of life, and then also that death is here.
Yeah.
Like, so how are we balancing life and death?
Mm-hmm.
Zombie movies really force us
Yeah.
to, not maybe really forced, because some people just watch them to watch them. How
Mm-hmm.
do we feel about death? How do we feel about life? Are we actually living our life? So if the zombie apocalypse happened
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, would I be full of regret and be like, oh, I wish I would have done this? Or is it like,
Yeah.
okay, you know what? I lived a good life. So if I get bit, I can be like, okay,
Yeah. Just shoot me
I
in the
lived a
head and
good
we'll
life.
call it a day. Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
So Anna,
Yes.
who do you most relate to in these films?
Okay, well, okay. It's not just because I've met him multiple times and I think he's great, and he's still a very handsome man, and I forgot how hot he was in the original Dawn of the Dead. Obviously I'm
He
talking
was the
about,
best looking man in that movie.
yeah,
I will have to say, like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, and you know
I
what
did
I'm talking
too.
about already, like Ken Ford
Yes.
story, who played Peter. But I enjoy Peter's character. For me, I think that just as a person, I tend to put a lot of pressure on myself. I have a strong habit of bypassing my own care and needs to ensure that everyone else is okay, doing what needs to be done, especially at the end where he's like, Franny, you go ahead. And, he's fighting the zombies, and then he sits down and he's like, I guess I'm just going to end it. But then he's like, no, I want to go. I want to keep going. I want to live. And I feel like, I don't have days necessarily where I just feel like ending it in that sense, but I think we all have moments where we feel so burnt out from tending to the needs of others. But then we also have that spark that's like, yeah, I still got to live too. I got to keep going. And I just really enjoyed that. And also the relationship with Roger, and being there for your friend or loved one in their most difficult time and doing what had to be done. Because I think it's very bittersweet. I don't want to romanticize it too much, but the care and love you feel for someone to do something that hurts you so deeply, but you know that is the best thing for them and that's what they wanted. I
Mhm.
really, I hope that that's the type of person I am. I really do. But yeah, and
Yes, you.
Ken, if you're listening, love you. Not in a creepy way, just think you're fantastic. So yeah. What about you, Margaret?
Yes. I love your answer. So I was waffling between him and Franny, and I'm gonna have to go with Franny. I feel like I'm the one that is just gonna be trying to caretake everybody, trying to make
Mhm,
everybody feel comfortable, trying to make it as like normal as possible, even though it's
mhm.
not normal. So let me go ahead and make
Yeah.
dinner. Let's go ahead and try to make this feel like
Yeah.
there's not zombies trying to
Mhm,
eat us right now. And yeah,
mhm.
so
I really
Franny.
honestly, I could picture if we were like stuck in the mall, I'd be like, okay, Margaret, you go ahead. I'm gonna try to make it if I can. Like, I could see myself saying that and you being like, do you need anything before I go? Like, I could see like, this dynamic between the two of us, and I think it's great.
Yes.
So, and the other question I have is after watching these movies, do you feel like cremation and aquamation make even more sense? Because then you're not going to come back.
Yes. Well, depending on which zombie
Yeah.
universe you live in,
Mhm.
some the dead are gonna rise, others you have to get bit or scratched. It
Yeah.
starts with patient zero and it
Mhm.
spreads. So in those, I'd be like, no, I can't even say that because I'm
Yeah.
for aquamation, I'm for
Mhm.
green burial, I'm for no aquamation
Mhm.
because green burial just means the dead are gonna rise again. So
Yeah.
yes, I would. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's the other thing too is, it that's the thing that always strikes me is as popular as embalming was and still is, there's nothing to reanimate if you follow proper procedures and processes. These would be green burials that are coming. Um, so that's one hole that I do see in a
So
lot
if
of
you
this.
had no embalming, I think you have a great point because then just put somebody in the ground, they're gonna
Mhm.
rot, so they're not gonna come back because they're just gonna be nothing but
Yeah.
bone. Anyways,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
the embalming.
Exactly. So yeah. Um, that's that's reminds me though of the which I don't want to give too much away because this will be another episode, but one of the Return of the Living Dead movies where they have like the half zombie tied down and they like ask her, they're like, why are you so angry? What's going on? Or something like that. And she's like, I feel myself rotting. And I was like, ooh, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And eating makes the pain go away, right? And I'm like, how grief centric is that? Like, my emotions are rotting and killing me, so I'm gonna eat a bunch of junk food so I don't feel anything. I was like,
Yes.
yeah, that's definite grief
And
behavior there.
definite grief behavior. And second movie, who do you most relate to?
Oh, that's a good one. Probably the dog.
That's what I was gonna say. The dog,
Yeah,
just doing the dog thing.
I think we can agree the dog.
Yeah.
And once it, yeah, I mean, I think the dog's one of the smartest characters in the whole movie, so go with the dog.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hmm. What was his name? Like Pickles or Freckles or something?
Something like I don't remember the dog's
Something
name. I
like
think you're
that.
right.
Some kind of cute name, but yeah. Good job,
Mm-hmm.
dog.
Yes. Good job.
Yes. Well,
Yes.
just as a teaser, we've got some other Living Dead movies coming. So hang in there. I think we'll have some interesting, kind of cool, different conversations just based on the thematics of the films. I think socioeconomic and sociodynamic isolation will be one of them, and another will be weaponizing situations. So I'm pretty excited for these to come down the pike. What about you, Margaret?
Yes, I'm really excited. I feel like these movies really encapsulate life, the
Mm-hmm.
dynamics we currently live with, as well as putting it in our face in a lot of ways of
Yeah.
what it is like to be grieving
Mm-hmm.
actively or even subconsciously as we
Yeah.
have to grieve, like both movies, you have to grieve all these different things. It's just
Mm-hmm.
accentuated because it's the zombie apocalypse.
Oh, yeah. Completely. I'm so excited. Well, I hope that
Me too.
all of you little creepers and reapers tune in for next time. Until then,
Yes.
close the blinds, enjoy the darkness, take a little naparoonie in your coffin, and join us for the next time. Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye.